My name is Scott Holmes. I'm a premier field engineer with Microsoft. I specialize in SQL Server. Business intelligence is my main specialty. I've been working for Microsoft for about 9 years now. That whole time's been with SQL. About the last 5 of that's been with the business intelligence community. Prior to that, I was working with SQL since it was back actually Sybase. So got a decent amount of experience with the product. What I'm going to go through today, or tonight, is I'm going to go through our Power BI stack. Now, when I say Power BI, technically that's our cloud offering for business intelligence. The products I'm going to show you, though, are not strictly limited to the cloud. They can be used individually on a desktop through Excel. Some of them can be used as a server or an enterprise level solution through tabular analysis services and so on. So even though it's listed as being Power BI, it's not strictly something that you can only use if your company is able to get up into the cloud, because there are certain companies where that's just not a possibility these days, either through security concerns, what have you. So let's go ahead and get into what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about provisioning a Power BI account, so the actual cloud offering, how to get that started running for your organization, and even as a test environment. Going to talk a little bit about configuring some of the components inside of that, and then we're going to go through the individual applications themselves. So Power Query, Power View, Power Pivot, Power Map, and Q&A, which is our searching utility. Sorry. So a general overview of what we've got. Power BI is a hosted environment. So this is a cloud-based offering. The servers are running in Redmond or wherever. You contract out for the service, and it'll spin up as many accounts as you contract for. So you get the whole Office suite. You can also add in Power BI on top of that, which will give you the ability to bring in your data and work with it up there. One of the nicest things about it is it's pretty much automated completely for the installation routine. SharePoint is one of the things you get with this. I don't know how many people here work with SharePoint. The only time I've ever set up SharePoint correctly the first time out was through this, because I didn't have to do absolutely anything at all. It allows you to use shared data sets. You can pull data in from a wide variety of sources, whether they're up in the cloud already, back down on local premises, or just individual documents that you're finding through OData feeds and what have you out, government sites and so on. They can all be pulled in and used to create new data forms that you can use for your company. The end results are not just PC compatible, but tablet compatible as well for the most part. So you've got the flexibility of being able to deploy things on, a very mobile sort of solution. And one of the nicest things about this is the versions are identical throughout that whole stream. So whether you're dealing with a desktop version, the cloud version, or a server version, you're dealing with the same product. So you learn it once, and you've learned it for all those different platforms. So if you're learning the Power Pivot data end of things, once you know how to do that in Excel, you can do that on the tabular version of analysis services. You can do that in Excel. You can do that up in the cloud. So learn it once, get multiple use out of it. I'm going to take you quickly through provisioning an account. Really, all you have to do is specify a domain that you're creating and link it up with an admin account and click OK. Walk away, go to lunch, what have you, come back a little bit later. Everything should be done. The SharePoint usually takes the longest of all the components to create. Once it's done, but it's flawless. It's set up completely for you. Nothing to have to do. One of the easiest things we've ever created for setup. After you've done that, then you'll go in and prepare your site. So you're going to have different licenses that you will have purchased, and this is where you'll go and create your users and then assign which licenses they've got available to them. So whether they're just using the Office components or whether they're using the BI components or a mixture of the two. So getting into the Power BI components themselves, so that's setting up your environment up in the cloud. If you're going to be working in the cloud, you may have a data set that's down on your local premises that you need to access. You need a secure pipeline to be able to get to that from the cloud without other people being able to jump in and hijack your data. So we do that through the creation of a gateway. The gateway is a small service that's running on your local database server. Currently, it can only be SQL Server or Oracle. But this service will be running, and this service provides the endpoint that the cloud portion of the gateway is going to connect back down to and pull the data up. You're also going, once you've created a gateway, you also end up creating a data source, which is associated with that gateway. The data source is where you, the screen to configure it looks pretty much like any one of our normal database connection screens. Specify the database, or the server database and the account you're going to be using to log into it. But then you also pick out which tables and views you're going to expose to the end user. So essentially this is creating an isolated package that they're going to be able to use. If you've ever used report modeling from reporting services, same sort of concept. You create a subset of an entire database, and then the end user is only able to pick from the components inside of that subset. That would be that screen. The next part of the Power BI suite that's not one of the global overall components, one of the things that is really just up there in the cloud is the Visualization Center. And this is just a screen. It's basically a SharePoint website that gives you the ability to control all the different documents and everything in one place. It gives you the jump-off point for doing the Q&A, natural language querying, and just pretty much holds all your Power BI reports, handles the refreshing and everything else. Document management, just the same as it is in SharePoint. You've got the ability to schedule refreshes, open your documents up in Excel for editing, upload new documents, and add these into favorites. So that's kind of the overall portion of the cloud portion of things. What I'm going to do now is start going through the individual components of the Power BI suite. So the first thing we're going to start with is Power Query. Power Query is, you can think of this basically as the new cloud version for SSIS. So this is a tool for taking a lot of different data sets, bringing them together, modifying them on the way in, basically use like Lego blocks, putting together this data set, and then dumping it into your database or your Power Pivot document. Second here. Pardon me. I had a bit of bronchitis lately, so I don't want to keep coughing into the mic here. All right, so it's modular query creation. Basically, one of the nice things about this allows you to access data from a totally unlimited number of data sources. There's really, if it's got an ODBC driver out there for it, we can attach to it through Power Query and bring your data in. This is also the method that you would use when you're using a gateway to access your data back down on a local on-premises server. You do that through, the only way we've got to do that is through Power Query. As you'll see when we start getting into this, you're actually able to add and remove modules without necessarily affecting other things in the flow. If you've used SSIS, you know that if you pull something out of the middle, you've now interrupted the flow of all the rest of the information through that SSIS package. Whereas with this, you can pull something out of the middle, and it'll still usually end up reconnecting everything, and you're able to go from there. Gateway access. So the gateway that we create, we end up giving you an OData feed URL that you can plug in as your data source. Once you plug that in, you're able to access your data just as you would, through any database. It's just you're doing that reduced subset of data. This screen here showing what the menus look like. I opened this up 2 days ago, and apparently the latest refresh, they've gone and completely redone everything that's available to you. You now have 4 menus. Nothing's on the same spot anymore. So this screen has pretty much had it at this point. But basically, you've got a new set of documents available to you, or a new set of options available to you to work through the workbooks. Modifying queries, we've got a lot of different options available to us. Some of them are not really necessarily typically standard. So you can actually do things like keep a range of rows out of the data set rather than keeping just the first 100 or whatever, or having to resort things in a different manner to pull back the rows that you need. We can remove alternate rows. We can go through and analyze the data for errors and remove the errors from any rows containing errors. We can also do merging and appending of information between different tables, and we'll see that in just a minute here. Merging queries, you can consider this to be a join. You specify the table that you're working with and then another table to join with it, specify what column you're going to be doing that join on. You can use multiple columns for your join conditions, and then when you're done with it, you've got one table with the additional information plugged into it. One thing to be aware of with this is, especially if you're using this up in the cloud, is that the where clause is not pushed through to the source databases. So you're going to bring back an entire data set, another entire data set, and then you're going to go and you're going to do that joining condition up in the cloud. So it's not like you're going to be pushing that where condition down and bringing back small data sets up there. You could be potentially, possibly pulling a lot of information up through your connection. So that is one thing to watch out for, at least with merges. Filters, on the other hand, are pushed down to the source. So if you're applying a filter inside of one of the tables, that filter is pushed down to the source so that when you go and actually load your data, you're only bringing up through your pipeline whatever fit that filter. Once you've done a merge, you've got the ability to do 2 different options to it. One of which is to expand, the other is to aggregate. So if you aggregate information, if there were multiple rows that matched from the secondary table that matched the row in the first table, if you aggregate, you're going to be specifying whether to sum this up, average it, what have you. If you expand it, you're going to pick which columns you want to bring back from the secondary table. They're going to be added into your new table. You could very well end up with, if there were 10 rows on the secondary table that matched whatever row it was in the primary table, you're now going to have 10 rows in the primary table. Why they call it expand, basically. Query settings. This is actually one of my favorite little tools that they put in here. The applied steps portion of this, you can go back in time at any point in your structuring here and see what exactly the data looked like when you applied that particular step. So if we go back to, in this case, promote headers, I can see what the data looked like as soon as I had brought it in and put the headers up on the thing and hadn't made any other changes. You click on one of the other ones and it shows you what the data looks like now that those filters have been applied. And finally, for Power Query, loading settings. We've got 2 options. Actually, it's 3 options available to you. Load to worksheet, load to data model, or don't load. If you load to worksheet, the data that you've got that this query is producing is going to be brought back and put into your Excel worksheet. If you load it to the data model, it's going to be put into a Power Pivot workbook behind that Excel worksheet. And then unchecking both of them, what it does is it'll save the query out, the query structure, so that you can continue working with it. but it doesn't actually load the data. This can be really useful during development time so that you're not, every time you save the model, you're not having to go back and bring up all that data again, save it all out. It saves a lot of time by turning that off and then only turning on load the data model once you're actually ready to start working. So, that having been said, let's go ahead and take a look at Power Query. So what I've got here is an Excel worksheet. There's 2 tabs to it, one of which is dates, one of which is product category. Oops. There we go. All right, so I've got an Excel worksheet. Right now, all it's got in it is 2 tabs, one of which has dates, one of which has product category. There's no Power Pivot opened up behind this one yet, and I haven't started with the Power Query components either. So I'm going to go to the Power Query menu, and we're going to pull from, in this case, from a database. I'm going to go from the local SQL server here. And that brings up my Navigator window here. Now, the Navigator gives you basically just a tree view structure of what the database looks like. Any views and user tables that are available for you to pick from. You'll notice that as I'm scrolling past these, we're getting a sample of what the data in this table actually looks like. That's just usually like the top 20 rows from that table. But it gives you a good idea of what the data set looks like without having to do a quick select star from whatever table to see what your table structure really is. It also will list out all the columns that you've got available to you. I'm going to go ahead and select multiple items from this, and I'm going to take product and product subcategory. I'm also going to change my load options here. And I only want to create the connection right now. I'm not going to add this data to the data model. This is something that looks a little different from the slides that I had up here just because this is part of what they changed around very, very recently. Load. So once I've clicked load, I've got 2 workbook queries back now. I've got dim product and I've got dim product subcategory. As you can see, same thing happens when I'm mousing over them. It gives me a representation of what it looks like. And we've got the ability to go in and just start working with it. So double-clicking on it brings up a new window. Essentially looks like an Excel window anyway. This is the table that we're working with, all the columns to it, all the data. And you can see here we've got applied steps. So we've pulled back from the source. And then we're working on navigation right now. First thing I'm going to do is change the name on this. Now, we only need a couple of the columns from this table. So we're going to keep product subcategory, the English product subcategory name, and the product category key. Now, right-click on this, we've got the ability to either remove these columns or we can actually remove all the other columns. This is one of the things I like about this is that they actually thought ahead on some of these things and give you the ability to do things the easy way around. I'm going to go ahead and remove other columns. And we're left with just those 3 columns that we wanted to actually keep. I'm going to change the names on some of these as well. Pull out that, make them a little shorter. All right, so you can see that as I've done this, we've now got two new steps that have shown up down here. We've got removed other columns and renamed columns. As I was saying earlier, we can go back to any previous step in this list and see what the data looked like at the point when that transform was applied here. So by clicking on source, we can see what the data looked like when it was originally brought in. When we remove the other columns, we can see what it looked like after I pulled those columns out, but before we had changed any of the names. So clicking on renamed columns, we see what our final result looks like. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Go ahead and we'll work on the next one. So, dim product. In this case, let's see, we'll pull out category Q need. This one actually is probably the one that I really should have done the remove other. Yeah, let's just do that. Product subcategory. Sorry. Once again, remove other columns. I'm just left with these four. I'll go ahead and do some renaming here as well. Okay. So I've now got two tables that are out here. I've got the one we're currently working with, and I've got the other one, the product subcategory table. What I can do now is I can merge these two together. So I can, there we go. So if we go into merge queries here, it starts with the table we've currently got active. And brings us all the columns that are available for that. We can then select another table that's available, highlight the columns that you need to do the joining on, and like I said, you can do multiple column conditions for this joining. The key thing is if you click on this one and then this one, this one and then this one, subcategory key is going to be the primary and product key is going to be the secondary column that you're doing your joining on. You can say only include matching rows because we do have these nulls here. We can filter those out and click OK. And you'll see it creates a new column here which has data of a data type just says table. The reason for that is because we should have multiple, depending on what our data set is, we should end up with multiple rows matching from the secondary table into the primary table. So since it can't show that all on a single row, we have to give it a table. And this gives you the ability to now go in here, click on the little icon up on the top there, and tell it whether you want to expand that information. So if you had 10 matching rows for the one row in the primary table, you'd now have 10 rows in the primary, or to aggregate things. Aggregation, you don't have a whole lot of choices for it. It's pretty much sum, count, depending on they had average in here at one point. I don't know if they pulled it out or if it's dependent upon the context. In this case, though, what we're going to do is we're going to expand. We're only going to expand out the subcategory name and the category key. Click OK. And we now have two additional columns here, which are subcategory name and I like to get rid of that new column portion of the title just to make things easier to deal with, and category key. So we've now done that join between these two tables. When we go and import this data now, what's going to happen is we're going to save this query out, and just like an SSIS package, we're going to kick this off at some point. And when we do that, it's going to start going through from stage 1 on through. It's going to make our data connection back to the database or to the databases. We could have had one of these be a local SQL Server database instance, another one be a text file, and another one be an OData feed coming off of the Census Bureau. All that, it's going to go out to each one of those data sources, bring all the fields or the data in, and then apply any of the transformations that we've done, such as any filters that we've applied, say we only want the data from this year. We could go in and, well, we don't have a year column on here, but we could say something. We can specify a filter where we only want these particular subcategory keys. So it'll apply that transform to this data set as well. It'll do the merging between all the data sets, and then what finally gets loaded into our Power Pivot or Excel workbook is this end result. When we go and do a refresh, it's going to go through that whole process all over again. I'm going to clear that out, though, because we do want everything else in there. As I said, they added a few more things. It used to be just the one menu. We now have a transform menu as well. You can actually transpose the rows, so basically do a reverse sort on things. Or actually, sorry, reverse rows does the reverse sort. Transpose switches between columns and rows. Basically a pivot type table. You can count the rows. You can do more involved data type operations. So apply statistical formulas to it, standard mathematical functions, trigonometry functions, and so on. We can add columns in as well. We don't have to work with just what's in our data set. We can add a custom column in. We can say that this custom column just equals 1. Click OK, and we'll now have a column on here which has nothing but 1 in it. You can use any formula you need to in that column, though. You could take two, first name, last name, concatenate them together, or anything like that. So you can create additional columns that will all be brought into your data set. Don't really need this one, though, so we can just come in here and delete that step. Like I said, though, any of this, you want to go back in time to any particular step, all you have to do is click on it, and you can see exactly what the data looked like at that point in time. Certain things here, if I pull out the expand new column, some of the stuff will drop off the output, but it still has a package that still runs and imports data. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, or close this and load it. And we're going to load this to a data model. So if I did this load to a worksheet, it's going to come back into the current Excel workbook. By loading it into data model, it's going to bring it back into the Power Pivot that's residing behind this Excel worksheet, which we'll see that coming up next. So that's pretty much a high-level overview of how Power Query works. Like I said, you can kind of think of this as the SSIS portion of the new suite that we've got for BI tools. So this is how you model your data, transform it, extract it from other sources, and then load it into your new database. So next up, quiz. Name 3 ways to transform data with Power Query. Okay. All right. We'll go on into Power Pivot. We do have to kind of move through these quickly here because this is a longer deck than I have time for. So Power Pivot is, if you think of Power Query as the SSIS component, Power Pivot's the analysis services component. This is your analytical database engine. This is starting in 2008 R2. We created Power Pivot as a way to kind of offload some of the workload from the IT groups and put it into the hands of Excel power users. It was a familiar environment for them to work in. It still gives them the ability to, it gives you the ability to model and aggregate and really analyze your data in detail. But by using the Excel environment, we allowed the idea was to give it to the power users, people that already know the data in depth, really, really like detailed. They're the ones that have the special one-off like text documents that have little pieces of information that the IT group doesn't even know about. Give them the ability to put these databases together without having to come to the IT group. And in some companies, I mean, you go to the IT group and say, I need this data set, and they'll be like, okay, get in the line. You're going to be waiting about 6 months before we can get to this. This gives them the ability to do this themselves. And once they've got it going, you can then host it in a SharePoint instance, share it out. The IT group can actually track things without having to own it. If that data set proves to be popular enough, they can go and take ownership of that, promote it to a tabular instance on analysis services, run it as a server-based solution, take care of the backups and restores and everything else that has to be done with it. Or it can remain forever as just something running on somebody's desktop or in a SharePoint instance. It really does reduce IT workload. I've seen this in some of my customers where they've shown one of their departments how to do this and let the department run, and they've come up with some phenomenal stuff that the IT group just doesn't have to worry about anymore. It's an in-memory engine. So analysis services has always been a very, very complex product. The main reason for that is because we had to aggregate everything up, have the information available for when the CEOs or CFOs requested their reports first thing in the morning. The way we handled that to get their results back fast was to pre-aggregate everything. What they found was with the way memory has gotten bigger and gotten cheaper, we were able to do this in memory a lot more effectively than we could by pre-aggregating things overnight and then storing that information that way. So now we do things in memory at the time of the querying. This changes around the whole environment and allowed us to actually go back to being a table-based object rather than being cube-based, which was something that was typically very difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. Like Power Query, we can access pretty much any data source that's out there. Other analysis services, SQL Server, Teradata, Oracle, it's all fair game to Power Pivot. Text files are commonly used, as well as Excel worksheets. So as I mentioned, the measures are calculated at query time. The work is done at query time. We're not pre-aggregating things. The entire database gets loaded up into memory, so this can be a limitation with Power Pivot. If you don't have a whole lot of memory on that system, it's not all going to fit. Current versions of it will start paging out now, but even then, it's still not the most efficient way to use Power Pivot. The Power Pivot model has to exist for certain things like Power View and Q&A. We have our own new language, DAX, which is based off of Excel functions. Again, trying to leverage that familiarity with Excel so that end users can do more of the work on their own. In fact, I've seen it where it's actually easier for an Excel power user to pick up DAX than somebody like me who came from SQL and MDX languages. So, and then it fits into the whole scalable philosophy that we've got. We've got the personal BI level, which is just running in Excel on your local desktop. We've got a team-based version, which would be that same document but uploaded to SharePoint. And then we've got the enterprise level, which would be either a tabular analysis services or the cloud-based offering. So the Power Query slides were the most I had. Most everything else should just be one slide per topic, just in case you're not a big fan of PowerPoint decks. All right, so back to our workbook. We've now got exactly where we left off. We've got the workbook query that's been loaded. So what do we mean by loaded? So if we go into the Power Pivot tab and go to Manage, we can see our product table that we've just created from that Power Query. Product key, subcategory key, product name, description, subcategory, and so on. All the stuff that we added in there. So Power Query is not our only means to be able to get data into Power Pivot. We can also just go and just do a, basically, there's a couple of different ways we can do it. One of which is straight from the Excel workbook that's hosting the Power Pivot data. So in this case, we're going to take this date table that we've got in here. I don't need this. I've just highlighted this entire table, and I'm going to add it to the data model. This is what we call a linked table. So it's linked to the external data, Excel file that is actually hosting our Power Pivot table. You can see right now we're actually slightly different view. It still looks like Excel, so sometimes when I switch back and forth, it might be a little hard to keep track. Excel does not have this lower area in here. That's generally the best way to make sure you're where we're working in. But we've created now a linked table. Let's see if I can get that. Which we're going to rename to being date. I'm also going to add in that other table, the product category table. Add that to the data model as well. Okay, and that's now drafted in those two tables from Excel into our pivot table. We can also get external data. I'm going to get, in this case, from SQL Server. Yeah, let's not do that. Oops. I'm going to use a query, and I've got the query already written here, so you don't have to watch me actually type out the entire select statement. So on the next screen, we're going to call this query customer. And click finish. This is actually a SQL query, so a standard T-SQL statement right there. Yeah, nothing special at this point as far as languages are concerned. The DAX is all pretty much on the side of getting data out of this. So we've just loaded those rows in to our customer table. I'm going to quickly add in two more. We've got our sales data. And at this point, I can either use the same from database SQL Server, or I can leverage that existing connection that I've already created. Open that, write a query. This one will be sales. And our last one, in case we have time at the end. Okay. So we've brought in 3 more tables: customer, sales, and employee. Going back to the data sources, as I mentioned, we can pull from pretty much practically anything. SQL Server, Access, Analysis Services, or other Power Pivots from OData feeds. Other data sources gives you the ability to access pretty much anything else. Teradata, DB2, text files, CSVs, you name it. The Excel data is going to usually come from a link table, starting from the Excel side and drafting it in after the fact. So what we're looking at here, similar to a typical Excel type environment, we've got the grid view here. We do have an ability to add columns. We've got this other area down in here, which is our basically our area for working with calculated measures. So there's a couple of things that we do need to do here. Now, if you've ever used analysis services, you know that the date table or the date dimension is a very, very key and important field in that system. It allows you to use time intelligence functions such as calculating year to date or same day last month sort of evaluations for your data. Since this is also an analytical engine, it's got the same sort of need to have a specialized view of the date table. So the first thing I'm going to do is I highlighted our date table here, and I'm going to go over to the Design tab and then mark this as a date table. This is so that the system knows this is where our date field is. This is where our date structuring is done, and we have to specify which column out of this table is actually the date field. In this case, it's full date. If you don't have any fields on this table that are of a date-time format, it's not going to pick it up. It's also not going to give you the option to go into this in the first place. You've got to make sure that at least one of your columns is set as a date-time format. So once I've done that, we can now take advantage of DAX formulas such as parallel period or year-to-date sales or something along those lines, where the date function portion of things are built into that function itself. Now, next up, I'm going to, on this, let's see, sales table, I'm going to add a new column in, and this is going to be the first time we're actually using real DAX syntax here. This column is going to be a link to the employee table. I've got 296 employees in the employee table, and I need to have a link back to the sales data for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do equal sign, which is the way all the DAX functions for columns start. We're going to do rand between and 1 to 296. So basically, we're just going to randomize a number between 1 and 296, and that's going to provide our link back to the key on the employee table. For the column formulas in DAX, they all start with an equal sign. Add that in, and we've got our randomized values. We'll call this employee. All right. So next up, what we're going to do, how many people in here have had exposure to analysis services in the past? Okay. So some of the things we're going to do here kind of will make sense from what we're doing in that when we get into hierarchies and all that. But one of the other things we're going to do is we're going to start, we're going to go into the diagram view here. So in addition to the table format view, which gives you a view of the data, we've also got the ability to look at the structure from a standard Irwin type design model. And this is one of the ways, I always think it's the easiest way to do our relationships between the tables. Let's put this one over here. All right. So we've got just a representation of our different tables here. We can click on one of these columns, say create a relationship, and fill things in from the text box. You can see it's already picked up that, it's already filled in the sales and product keys, so we just need to say product and product key. Create. You can also drag and drop, so we can go full date to order date. It doesn't matter which way you drag and drop, it can figure it out. So we can go this direction too, and it still knows which one's the primary key and which one's our foreign key relationship. No, it really only has the one style here. We don't support many-to-many. We also, if you're using something like, so say we've got an order date and a ship date on this table, both of which would tie back to full date, you can only have one of those as an active association at one time. So you can define both of them, but only one of them can actually be in use by the system. You also have to be careful about pass-through relationships. If you've got, depending on the data set, you can end up with things where you've got a reference coming off of one table and coming off of another that both end up resolving down to a key reference, but from a different point of view, and it says you've got duplicates and you can't do it. All right, well, we're going to these two up. How about now? Give me like 5 or 10 minutes. That'll be a good breaking point. Goes into our next topic. All right. So, all right. One of the things I'm going to show you how to do here. So on the product table, we've got a product category key here. We've also got a product category table. We can create a new column here, in which case we use a DAX function called related, and then a column name. So in DAX, instead of like Excel where you reference a column by A1 whatever, or a cell by that, you're going to reference it by table and column. So here we're going to go with product category, and what we're telling it to, whoops. So what we're telling it here is we're going to use the relationship that we defined between the two tables, and I want to pull back product category. So the actual name, the product category name. It's going to go down through the relationship between category key and on this table and category key on the other table. Oops. Syntax. And we've now got a list of the actual name for the categories. Since we've got the name for that, we no longer need the category key in here. We can actually come in and we can hide this from client tools. This is a very useful thing to do in that you can reduce the set of data that's available to them. Users are very fond sometimes of pulling in too much stuff and ending up creating essentially queries that would clog up the system because they pulled in way too much. By hiding it from client tools, we still have the ability to use it inside of our own calculations, such as doing this, resolving out the calculated category name, but the end user does not have the ability to access it. Oops. The The next ones I'm going to do are actually more similar to the way things would be done inside of Excel. So, oops. Yeah, that's right. So going over to the sales table, I can highlight any one of these or combinations of them and hit auto sum the same way you would in Excel. You'll notice it drops us down below in this extra area down here. This is our calculated measures field. Calculated columns, what we've been creating so far, these are evaluated at the time when the system starts up. So it's going to go through, and for each one of those rows, it's going to figure out what that value is supposed to be in there. The ones that are down at the bottom here, the calculated measures, these are evaluated at the time the query is run, and it's inside the context of the query. So if your query filters something down by quarter or geographic region or something like that, the sum of the sales amount that you're going to get is going to be based off of whatever that filtering was. So it's going to be based off of that quarter or that geographic region, what have you. Another thing is that the calculated columns, since they are calculated at the time when the system starts up, if you have 30 or 40 of these on each one of your tables, you're going to start really increasing how long it takes the system to come online. Answers will come back like immediately, but that startup time is going to keep getting extended when you do that. It's also going to use up more and more memory. The ones down here use up only what they need to actually generate that value at query time. Let's see, what else are we going to do? Order quantity. We have the ability, you also don't necessarily have to, this is a really bad data set for this, but you can select what your calculated measure is going to be for these automatic ones as being sum, average, count, what have you. The last one I'm going to do here, and again I'm going to cheat. The last one I'm going to do here is a KPI value. So what we've got here, you'll notice that while the columns started with just an equal sign, the calculated measures start with a name and a colon, and then the equal sign for the formula. All this is doing is just taking sum of order quantity and then applying, it's just dividing it by 5,000 to get an arbitrary value that we can use for our KPIs. Once we've got that, we can come in here and create a KPI itself. Going to go off of an absolute value of 1. That value that I've divided by 5,000 is going to end up giving us what we need to for this, for getting us down to a 0 to 1 sort of thing. You can set your thresholds for your coloring, your different icon sets. Click OK, and at this point now, anything that can actually consume and produce a KPI value, such as Excel, Power View, any of the other tools like that, this data will be available for them. You know, the icon set that you're using will be in there and display properly. So, yeah, one other thing I want to do. Going back into the diagram view, and I'm only going to do this for, actually, date. I'm going to create a hierarchy here. So if you're familiar with analysis services or anything like that that uses hierarchies, basically this is a structured order, so things that roll up into each other. So we're going to start off calendar, which is going to have the calendar year followed by the calendar quarter, month name, and then our full date. And just, let's see, design. Okay. So what this gives us is this gives us a hierarchy, a roll-up. So we can start with calendar year 2014. That breaks down into these quarters. Each quarter contains one of 3 months. Each one of those months contains a range of dates. And that is pretty much it for the basics of Power Pivot. So what we've done at this point now, starting with Power Query, we've identified data sources, brought them into the Power Pivot. From inside Power Pivot, we've created more data and put it together. We've actually designed a whole database in here at this point. This database is running in memory. And what we're going to get to after the break is the actual reporting off of it, so the visualization side of things. So you can think of it this as what would be the reporting services aspect of things, but it's much better than reporting services at this point. So, all right. This next part coming up, this is more for the visualization people, the people that like to see, nice, well-presented documents, don't want to have to work really hard to do them. So we're going to start with Power View, and then we're going to get into Power Map. Before I get started, though, I did have one question out there. Where do you get this? So the Power Pivot and Power View both come with Excel 2013 and also the Office 365. I believe it's the Pro version of that offering. Power Query is a downloadable plugin for Excel. It's a free plugin. You just have to download it. The only reason for that is just because it came out too late for it to be included with the Excel 2013 package. Power Map, which we will get into after this, that was a downloadable plugin for a preview. The thing was supposed to have been time-bombed back in May. It doesn't seem like the time bomb actually ever worked because it still functions for anybody who had it installed, but the download's no longer out there. The only way to actually get it from this point going forward is through Office 365 Pro. So, Power View. So as Power Query is kind of the equivalent of SSIS, Power Pivot's kind of the equivalent of analysis services. Power View is kind of the equivalent of reporting services. If you've worked with reporting services before in the past, you know that it's you're able to get in there and create some very, very detailed reports. You've got control over every last little object, borders around each one of the chart bars and everything like that, complete control over coloring and everything. Power View doesn't have quite that level of control. Power View is much more simplified in what it's got available to you. But unlike reporting services, where you started with a very rough blank canvas, Power View gives you a lot of very sensible built-in components that allow you to quickly put together some amazing charts that can do things that reporting services never could do. Now, there's still some times when reporting services may be the best option. If you've got to do a report that's got to be, a very, very structured sort of style for your company, something that needs to get mailed out on a monthly basis, something like that, reporting services may still be your best option. Power View, on the other hand, you can create the reports, send these reports out to the CEO, CFO, whatever, and then let them start doing their own analysis because these reports are all interactive, which you'll see in just a few minutes here. It really is dynamic, interactive reporting. There's nothing you really have to do to it. Just start dropping objects on the page, and that's pretty much it. You've got the familiar objects that you have with reporting services, tables, matrices, lists, charts. We may not have as many types of charts. You don't have coloring options, but you've got the ability to make things move over timelines. You've got the ability to have things interoperate with each other. And the mapping components inside of Power View are better than inside of reporting services. So that having been said, I'm going to jump out of this and go straight into, if I can find my mouse. So we're going to go back to our Excel workbook. Now, what we're going to do is, this is inside of the Excel portion of things, this is not back in the Power Pivot side. We're going to go and do an insert, and we're going to insert a Power View report. What this does is this opens up a design canvas for us. I'm going to just close down the filters so we've got a little more room when you're doing this on the big screens and they shift the sizes. You don't have a lot of space to work with. Let me get rid of this. So, and this is a little glitch that pops up every once in a while where renaming doesn't always work right. But these are the fields that we've got from our Power Pivot table, or Power Pivot tables. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Customer, and I'm going to grab a country, and then I'm going to go into Sales, and grab our order quantity, and then I'm going to go into Calendar Quarter, which should be under Table 1 here. This is going to be actually under our calendar hierarchy. So you can see just by clicking these things, it's creating a table for us automatically. We've got a little bit of control over some aspects of this table. We don't have a lot of control over anything much more than font size, ordering of the columns. That's about it. We do have the ability to do things as either a table or a matrix. The difference between a table and a matrix, a table is a set structure. So what we've got here right now is a table. It's got if we know we need X number of columns, that's how many we've got there. A matrix is a dynamic number of columns. So if you're doing your columns on like year, and you set this up as a table, you have to create a column for each year that you're exposing. And when you get to next year, then you have to go into your report and add another column. With a matrix, it's based off of whatever their query produces. So, if you get to the end of this year, and as soon as you start getting records for 2015, that 2015 column is just going to show up automatically on a matrix because that's part of the result set. It's also got the ability to do lists, which is kind of like the old Access, or cards rather, kind of the old Access style of free form, being able to just drop elements down on a page and then cycle through the record set and have them show up that way. So yeah, right now, nothing really all that special about this. I'm going to go ahead and create another table. And again, we will start with country. And from the sales table, we will grab, there's a sum of order quantity. And we're also going to take that KPI status that we created. So you can see here it's already showing up our colored indicators showing how well the sales were for each one of these countries. And then we'll do one more table. Again, starting with country. Sum of sales amount. And we'll go with calendar quarter again. Okay. So I've got 3 tables on the screen right now. I'm going to change this one here over to a chart. Just by clicking that chart, we end up, where is it? There it is. So we've now got it converted over to a chart. Yeah. Yep. There's actually a couple different ways to attack that. So you could either do it just on one of the tables. You could do it by clicking on something that was linked, or you can do it, the filter, the filter area, which I collapsed, and there he is. Yeah. So this would probably be the way you would do it for what you're talking about doing across all the objects on that page would be that filters area. All right, this one here, we could do this as a bar chart, but I'm actually going to do this one as a map. Go ahead. So you'll notice that it pulled back a Bing map. We have a couple different options available to us for the maps. We've got the standard view, the road map, aerial. So whatever happens to fit best for your type of reporting needs or for that particular report. I'm just going to use this one right now just for visibility. And I'm going to one thing that's a little tough about this is trying to find the edges of objects sometimes. There we go. Okay. So now I was talking about things being interactive. So what I mean by that is right now we've got a chart. Okay, and you saw literally how long this took me to put this together. I mean, in reporting services, this would be like half a day's worth of work easily. And that's, you know, if it didn't blow up on you at some point. I didn't say that. This literally was like less than 5 minutes me creating this thing here. It already looks halfway decent. Not necessarily the best for design, but it doesn't look too bad. But one of the things that you'll never be able to do with a reporting services report, okay, first off, this is the sort of thing you can do, but this is something you have to code for. If I hover over something, I get the flyout, which has detailed information. That can be done in reporting services, but you have to actually code for it. You have to put in there an expression to pop out when you do one of the mouse overs. But what you can't do is you can't click on something like this and have it automatically filter all the rest of the objects on the page to show just what's related to this. So this is going to be fourth quarter North America sales. We've now filtered this table down to just fourth quarter North America sales. And this table is this chart as well. If I click off of there, it brings me back to the overall view. I can click on this and just see the second quarter across all the countries that we've got. You can see it didn't filter by country here or by region, but it did filter by the quarter, and that everybody was doing pretty bad that quarter. Both the chart and the table were affected, but when I clicked that one value up there. This works back and forth, both directions on these charts. So this is what I was saying about it's a very easy way to create a report that you can hand off to a CFO, CEO, whoever, and let them start doing their analysis. You create that initial 5-minute thing, you're done. You go and email this report off to the CFO, and he can sit there and start clicking on different things. Like say, okay, so what did this region do? What did this region do? How can we help them improve in those areas? So they can start doing their own analytics by just clicking on these things and seeing what the contributions are to the various elements. Good question. So Power Map has the ability for geographic, for locating things geographically, going down to, we've got country, state, province, city, zip code, and latitude and longitude. The data goes to that level for most countries at this point. There are still some places in the world where we don't get down much past city. But, I mean, even when this first came out, you were still able to get down to, latitude and longitude you can get down to for anything, but you can get down, like, to zip code level on pretty much most places in U.S. or North America, Europe, and Asia. And now I believe it's pretty much, there might be a couple holes in things like North Korea or something like that, but wherever you get it from. So I mean, this information here was just off of the customer order table from it. Oh, the GIS mapping thing goes back through Bing Maps. So Bing Maps is the one that's responsible for associating whatever your data element for city was with the GIS city. So, and you will get some weird things every once in a while, like if you put in just city, and one of the things I was mapping out involved Berlin, Wisconsin, which of course it kept trying to put the pie chart over in Germany for that one. But yeah, I mean, so because if you don't specify the state or the country, that's right. So, but apart from the little things like that, it's very nice, very hands off. Yes. No idea. I don't work for that group. I mean, I know we use the Bing Map stuff, but I don't know if there's anything. I know there's no way to like pull Google Maps into this or anything like that, but I don't know if there's any interaction between those three. Power Map can get down to counties, or get into counties rather. It's actually up from cities, but yeah. Power Map, as you'll see in a few minutes, has a lot more. I mean, it's Power Map. It's more for geographic locations or locating data. But so yeah, you can see right off the bat, this is very easy to use, very easy to come up with some very impressive designs. People have told us about how they've gone and created this stuff, and their bosses have just been floored by the work that they were able to create. Let's see. So we've got other types of charts as well. We do have a scatter chart available. Unfortunately, this data set doesn't really work too well with it, but give it a shot. So among the other things that we can do, and let me go make one change real quick. Oops. So we can take something like the employee photo here. And drop that down. And we can actually end up turning this into a slicer. Put their shipper name in as well. So we can take that. Yeah, I guess we have to take the name out if we're going to do that. Turn this into a slicer, in which case what we can do then is create another table here. Country. Yeah. And sales. And how about that? So what we can do is, now that this is a slicer, we can click on this person here and see what their contribution to the sales were. Essentially, it works as a filter. Again, not the best data set for displaying this, but a very, very easy way to start creating, very dynamic, interactive reports that just very impressive for the C-level group. Doesn't matter whether it's the employee photos, pictures of your products, what have you. Being able to use this as your filters, quite handy. We'll clear that. I'm not using anything, actually. It's called M. Yes. Yeah. And actually there are certain spots in here sometimes where you're able to expose it, but I don't remember where they put that screen. Let's see. So we, yes, actually it is. So think of Slicer as a where clause. So a where clause. Slicer kind of comes out of the analysis services side of the division here. So you can think of it as a where clause. There actually is an analysis services is actually a where clause, and then there's also the ability to slice on something. But they're similar enough. Right. All right, let's see, we need some dates. Let's go with month. Chart, scatter. What do we want for that? Size. Let's go with sorry. So the bubble chart that I'm working on here, play axis. So what I've done is drop down order quantity and sales amount for our X and Y values. Kind of kludgy, but it'll work. Sorting the bubbles by color for country, and then a play axis of month name. So again, I literally just 2 minutes to drop all those down on here. And again, this data set's probably not the best for this, but push the little play button and you can start seeing things move along the screen as you go and track down your sales over time. Depending on if I had better fields for some of these things, we could have those bubbles expanding, contracting, depending on the sales amounts. In fact, we can probably do that right now with just doing this. Although it's going to be harder to see because they're going to stay on one axis right now. Yeah, so you can kind of see them growing, but not really too well. Yes, you would. Not only that, but one of the really cool things is you click on the bubble, and it will show you the path that it was taking throughout that entire time frame. You can set it back to a specific, to one of the earlier points in time. Play through from there. Yeah, a lot. Again, absolutely no work involved whatsoever. This is something that reporting services still can't do because it can't do the timeline, playing axis. Great way to visualize what's going on. And explain things out to people. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to go back here. Yeah, so next quiz. What special step needs to be done to get Power View charts to interact with each other? Absolutely nothing. I mean, no special steps. It's just put them down, and as soon as they're on that page together, they start playing together. As long as they've got some common data element between them that you can use, they'll interact. No. It was not dependent upon those relationships we defined in Power View. It was really just the fact that we had some shared element between those tables. Now, they can work through those relationships, of course, so it kind of expands what you've got the ability to do. But even without those relationships, I could have put down two charts, and as long as they had some common thing, like maybe country or something between them, they'd have been able to interact with each other. By using those relationships inside of Power View, then you can spread that out across so that I can, don't necessarily have to have, say, country on both of the charts or whatever. One could be sales data, the other one could be employee data, but there was still some way to get to that. So they can use it, but it's not required. If it can't resolve something or there's no way to get there, it will put up a little yellow box at the top of the field selection screen that says relationships may need to be created, and gives you the ability to actually do that right there and then plug that into the Power View without having to jump out of there, or Power Pivot rather. All right, Power Map. So Power View is an overall reporting solution. Power Map is really just geographic data plotting. Again, effortless design. You've got the ability to create scenes which you can replay. You can export these out into movie files, which can be embedded inside of Power Pivot presentations and so on. We do have auto detection of geo elements. We've got a few types of charts available to you. It's not quite the level that we've got in either reporting services or Power View. Let's see. It's got the interdependence between the charts, tables, and maps and everything again, but we'll just go right into the demo for this. All right. So once again, back in our Excel workbook, and I'm going to go back over to the Insert tab, and I'm going to go to Map in this case. Launch Power Map. And hope I've got enough resources right now. May not. Yeah. Give me a second here. Again, using Bing Maps as the data feed. I'm going to close that to get a little more room. We've got the ability to plot data, and so it's going off that same Power Pivot backend that we created. The first thing you have to do is plot your geographic information. It's already gone and found that the customer table is the one that's got the geographic information associated with it. We're going to go ahead and just do, say, country for this one. You can see that it automatically goes and associates it with its version, which is country region. We've got the following, all these possibilities. You can actually get down to street address on this. There's some pretty cool examples out there, crime statistics for Chicago and stuff like that, where it's mapped down to like a specific store on a street sort of thing. So you can get some very, very good detail on this. We're just going to stick with country for right now. After we've chosen what our geographic layer is, hit next. You know what? Let's go back. Let's choose state, province, city. That's what I said I was going to do. All right. Turn that off just to make things resolve faster. All right, so you can see it's already starting to put some little dots on the screen here. You'll also see that I can spin the globe really easily. I can change my perspective. This works really well for when you've got bar charts coming off of there, so you can see exactly how tall they are. We can zoom in. We can, whoops. Go to the next button, and we're going to go ahead and, let's see, sum of order quantity. Here's our sales. Sum of order quantity is going to be our height. Number of cars owned is going to be our category. Order date. Oh, where is it? Order date. Okay, so you can see here, I'm going to get rid of this. We've got bar charts showing up for each one of the states. You can get that down, like I said, to actual address level. Since we've got a time axis on here, we can play this. You can do a recording of this, do a flyover while this is happening, change your locations, record that whole thing, and put that out as a movie inside of PowerPoint. Again, you've got the call-outs just by hovering over something without even touching anything to show what the detailed information is. We can add additional layers. State, province again. I'm going to change this over to regional. Date. All right. So we can have multiple layers going. So we've got not only one type of information being shown on the bars or column information, but we can also show, saturation for the states, what have you. Again, we can play this, see as things appear. That can all be recorded. You can add additional charting information in. You can add text boxes and annotations so that they'll show up in your presentation at a certain point in time. And again, the same sort of cross-pattern filtering. So very, very, very useful tool, very quick, easy to use. Again, 5 minutes, come up with a really amazing presentation. So I think there's one more thing left to go, but I'm not going to be able to get into it, and that's Power Query. Just so you know what it is, it's a natural language query capabilities inside of Power BI. Now this one is the web only. But what you can do is instead of having to know SQL to be able to query data, you can use any one of these data sets that we've been creating, upload it to the web, and then type in something like show me sales by state. And it'll bring back sales by state. And the nice thing about it is, depending on what the type of information you've asked for, it'll change the visualization. So sometimes it'll bring back the information to the chart, sometimes in a table, sometimes in a map, depending on what's the most appropriate view. So if you say, show me sales by date, you're probably going to get it back as a map. If you just say, show me sales by salesperson, you're going to get either a chart or a table. You can change all that around. It all uses Power View as a back end to that, or to a way to create it. But it's a nice little tool for being able to search things, especially if you've got people that, they're not really, don't know SQL terms to be able to create select statements and everything. So that's pretty much it for the whole overall the Power BI stack. It is, for the most part, with the exception of certain things like the subscription parts of things, a lot of it's available just through Excel 2013. I encourage you to go out there, start playing with it. Like I said, learn it in Excel 2013, and it translates all the way up through enterprise level analysis services installations. So, definitely encourage you to go out and try it, play with it, and have fun with it.